All right, Enzo Maresca was fuming after Chelsea's 2-hour Club World Cup weather delay. We'd seen Reece James score the goal, then play stopped. He said US is probably not the right place to host the tournament. He and Reece James had this to say after the match.
I think for me personally it's not football. It's already 7, 8, 9 games that they suspended here. I think it's a joke, to be honest. It's not football.
We got to 85 minutes and then had to sit and wait for, I don't know, a long period. And it's quite disruptive, you know, when you're in the flow of the game. Lots of substitutions, you know, trying to get warm and stay warm. You know, it was difficult. The climate was, you know, very hot and humid, and the pitch probably wasn't the greatest as well.
I'm talking as a manager, because when you are 2 hours inside and you try to keep them in the game, but for 2 hours, they are speaking with the family outside for safety reason. They are eating something, they are playing, they are laughing. How you can keep them 2 hours inside focus? It's a joke. I can understand that for security reason, you have to suspend the game. But if you suspend the 7, 8 games, that means that probably is not the right place to do this competition.
The storms and bad weather have now caused 6 games, all held in different cities, to be suspended during the tournament. This, the longest of them, Benfica against Chelsea, a game that kicked off at 9 p.m. local time and finished at 1:40 a.m. the following day.
To be fair, looking at some of those games, people would be happy if they were just called off full time, wouldn't they? He's turned into an angry man, isn't he, Enzo Maresca? At the end of the season, he was telling journalists to F you, and he's been angry since he's got here. And I think there's some sort of vibe here, because, you know, I don't like to see other people angry like myself, but when he was managing Leicester City, this is true, when he was managing Leicester City, Enzo Maresca and his family rented my house out in the Midlands, and I'd feel that when he entered into that property, he was probably the happiest man on the planet. And there's some sort of vibe in that house.
Bad energy.
There's an energy and a vibe in that house, clearly, that just turns anybody that goes in there into the most miserable, angry, upset at everything man in the world. And he's turned into that.
He's not joking, by the way. This is actual, real information.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know about the energy in the house.
No, not the energy.
But he did. Yeah, he was. And he was a very pleasant chap and paid his rent on time, thankfully. But he has turned into, and I think he was a little angry when he was at Leicester when they were promoted, because they struggled at the second half of the season and he got a bit of stick from the Leicester fans, believe it or not, and they won the league. He's entered a new arena now, hasn't he, at Chelsea, where, you know, there was possibilities that they would not make the top 4 last year, or the top 5, which they did. There was a little bit of questioning from the media about his tactics, about the squad, and about this, and he got very angry about it. So he's in a different arena now, isn't he? He's in an arena where managing Chelsea, everything's been questioned. But again, I'll go back to this. He could win this competition, and it will matter not a job. Because what Todd Burley and the Chelsea fans and all the sort of investors at Chelsea will look at is how they improve next year, particularly in the Champions League and in the Premier League. And this is just a build-up for him. But he's so sort of tense and hyped up now that I can fear to see what he's going to be like if the wheels don't turn properly at Chelsea in the season. And that's where he's going to be judged this year, and he knows that.
He was successful when he was renting your house, so have you not got an apartment for rent in London for him? That might be the answer.
On my salary? Oh, Smogs, I don't think
now,
so.
Now, Alexis, I know you haven't been at any of these games where there's been a weather delay, but I know you've spoken to some of the people in and around the teams about it.
Yeah, Kay, and honestly, I agree with Enzo Maresca as well. But also remember, he is Italian, so that spicy side does come out. Kay, I know you know that very well. But look, he's absolutely right. I mean, it has been frustrating, not just for the players, not just for the technical staff around them, not just for the managers, but even for us, the journalists and the fans who we keep talking about so much in this tournament, the fans who FIFA and everyone are desperate to fill these seats so that it looks good on TV, so that we can get an idea of what kind of turnouts we will get next year at the World Cup, which is when all of this really matters, let's be honest. And I wouldn't necessarily say that the United States isn't the perfect host for these kind of tournaments, I would probably say certain places, certain stadiums, and certain states maybe not the right host for these. Look, we know Florida, there's a lot of open-air stadiums there. We have had, and we're probably going to get some more weather here in Atlanta right now, and when it rains, and it pours, and the lightning starts to come, but obviously it helps with the domed stadiums, and I'm not saying every stadium has to be one. I know that can also affect the pitch and the grass and everything, but also when we were for Manchester City's game against Juventus, it started pouring and the fans just had to run for cover. Some ran back to their cars, leaving at halftime because they were just thinking, look, this really isn't worth it. And Orlando, of course, Florida, we know how flat it is. When the lightning comes, it's going to be a delay of who knows how long. And overall, it just creates such a frustrating situation for everyone to watch and everyone to be involved in. So that's definitely something that I think FIFA should be thinking about when we consider the World Cup next year.
So what they're moaning about, though, is it the kick-off times or is it the weather?
I think it's the weather delay. And
you can't control the weather.
You can change the pitches. It's going to be these same stadiums next year. That's something you can't
Yeah, but the weather
control.
changes. The weather's not... Sometimes it pours down, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's lightning, sometimes some states get tornadoes, some don't. You know, you can't just judge it. You can't say, right, the World Cup's coming partly to America in a year's time. We can't play it this time because the weather's going to be this. We don't know. You just don't know.
Well, they changed the Qatar World Cup, didn't they, to a different time of the year?
Well, that's because it's
but
that's because it's unplayable. Unplayable in the summer at that temperature. Look, if anybody watches golf, anybody watches the PGA Tour, it goes around the country. Sometimes tournaments go swimmingly, and other times a storm comes in, and they have flash flooding, and they have to get supporters off, or they have to get the players off, and then they resume. You cannot. And what are they going to do? Take the PGA Tour to Europe? What are they going to do? They play every weekend. They play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes it's perfect, sometimes it's not. You cannot always just go in the weather. Maybe kick-off times could allow better for it if there's a delay and it's not 1 o'clock in the morning. But that's then a problem slotting your TV in for games being on at different times, and then globally, your global TV audience. It's very difficult, and I'm no FIFA fan, and I'm no UEFA fan. You know that. But it's very, very difficult here. You're trying to keep all your partners happy. You're trying to keep all the countries happy. You're trying to make sure as many people, and I'm talking about a World Cup, not a Club World Cup, because I couldn't give a toss about that. When the World Cup comes, it's about trying to get as many people to watch it as possible and have the balance right with safety of the supporters and have the weather conditions as good as you can. The problem is there's very few places in the world you can take any sort of sporting event and have a perfect scenario. And I think we've had a very unusual scenario this year in America, particularly in the East Coast, with some of the weather we've had in the last 10 days or so. It's not normal, it's brought more storms in, and it's been unfortunate. That is not to say, and by the way, when the World Cup comes, guess what? It'll rain. And it'll pour. And if you don't like it, sod off. But it'll pour. And you play in the rain. You can't play in lightning, you can't play in something that's more severe. But it will rain and you will have to adjust to it. But you can't sit here and say the World Cup's going to be a disaster because this storm's going to come in and that storm's going to come in. Because maybe it won't. We just do not know. This tournament, thus far, it's been unfortunate. It's happened. It's not ideal. But I think come the World Cup, it could be a completely better scenario. If we're just talking about weather, kick-off times, that's something different.
What do you think about Maresca saying that then, Frank, that perhaps it's not the right place to play a World Cup, the US?
Now, even if I understand what it means, because I guess for 2 hours it's hard to keep the players ready to carry on, but the two teams are in the same problematics at that time, and he's not going to be the only one. If he wants to criticize something, he has to criticize the competition, because what's going to happen to those clubs who are involved now, especially the one in Europe, for the next season? Are they going to be tired? Are they going to have many players injured? Let's see. But so far, the only thing you can criticize is that competition. But I just want to remind that in 2002, the World Cup in Korea and Japan have been held months before because of the monsoon. So it already happened, and you just mentioned Qatar. So you can deal a little bit, but that's a World Cup. next season. And you want to see a World Cup in different locations. We cannot always play in Europe because we are in a better weather condition. And I'm so happy that so far we cannot control the weather. But really, yeah, Mr. Maresca, be focused on something a little bit more interesting, because you cannot deal with that, and you are not the only one. And it's nice to play in the US, in Japan, I don't know, in Qatar before the World Cup before. That's interesting. That's for us in Europe, and as players, also former players, it's nice to be there. So don't do a European thing. It's not worth it.
I was in Donetsk in 2012 with John Champion, actually, working for ITV Sport in England. And the Ukraine-France game, I believe it was halfway through the game, and we had a major storm come in, and the game, I think it was off for half an hour or 45 minutes. We had to go back to the studio, and they had to fill. It's not an ideal scenario. Look, they had a World Cup here in '94, and my memory's not great. I don't think it was the greatest World Cup, but they had a World Cup here. They learned about the kick-off times, the heat, and the whatnot. These things as a player, it's what makes you stronger. It's when you go to these major tournaments, I'm talking about next year, it's the things that you have to deal with. For the players, it's okay. You go in the dressing room. It's not ideal, but you go in the dressing room, and when it all clears up, you come back out, you do your warm-up, you play. The bigger problem is, obviously, when I think, is when there's 90, 100,000 people and something really bad comes in. That's where the issue. The players will have to deal with it, and it's what the adversity throws at you at major tournaments, and it's how you deal with it is generally how you advance in these tournaments.